At my son's 14th birthday dinner at a crowded local pizzeria, my father FaceTimed from his deep-sea research vessel and asked, did the $1,500 a month finally get Owen into the Hopkins trial? I stood entirely frozen in the chaotic restaurant, the phone gripping my sweating palm. The camera lens was pointed straight at Owen, who was carefully feeling around the plastic tablecloth for his slice of pepperoni. The arcade games blinked and chirped in the background. A kid 2 tables over was screaming because he dropped his ice cream. But right there, in our vinyl booth, all the air had been sucked out of the room. What? $1,500, Dad? Across the sticky table, my older sister Nadia flinched. She nearly dropped her garlic knot onto her lap. Her hand froze in midair, a little bit of marinara sauce dripping onto her pristine white silk blouse. My dad wiped a heavy smear of machine grease off his forehead. Behind him, the cramped gray metal walls of the ship's cabin hummed with the vibration of the engines. The timber lease money, kiddo. I've routed it directly into the medical trust for the last 3 years. I let out a sharp, breathless laugh. It sounded more like a choke. My chest physically hurt. Dad, there is absolutely no trust. I took out a second mortgage on my condo. I drive an Uber until 3 in the morning. We never saw a single dime from you. His expression turned entirely to stone. It was a look I hadn't seen since my mother passed away a decade ago. A cold, terrifying anchor of a stare. Audrey, he said, his voice dropping an octave, cutting right through the noise of the pizzeria. I signed the transfer papers the week Owen lost his peripheral vision. $1,500 every single month. Nadia swore she'd act as the fiduciary trustee, so you wouldn't have to deal with the overwhelming paperwork. The chaotic noise of the restaurant faded into a dull, terrifying ringing in my ears. I turned my head slowly. Nadia was already waving her manicured hands frantically, her heavy gold bracelets clinking together. Dad's satellite connection is lagging, she stammered. Her voice pitched up nervously. Too loud, too fast. He's exhausted from the rig. He's mixing up the estate documents. You know how those offshore shifts mess with his head. But Dad was already hammering a button on his laptop keyboard off screen. A second later, my phone buzzed aggressively against my palm. An email with a heavy PDF attachment had arrived. 3 years of endorsed checks, Dad said. His voice was deadly quiet now. Deposited straight into Nadia's personal shell LLC. My chest tightened until I physically couldn't breathe. I looked down at the screen. The PDF loaded. 36 rows of scanned checks. $1,500 a month. 36 months. $54,000. I couldn't look away from the numbers. They blurred together, replaced by flashing memories. I thought about the afternoon I quietly pawned my grandmother's antique piano, just to afford Owen's screen magnifying software. I thought about standing in the desolate pharmacy parking lot in the freezing rain, sobbing uncontrollably over the steering wheel, because the experimental eye drops were $400 a bottle, and my debit card had declined. I remembered begging the administration at Owen's middle school to provide a dedicated aide. The principal had to quietly use discretionary funds so my son wouldn't walk into the hallway walls between classes, because the district denied the budget request. And then the memory that made my stomach physically turn over. The specialist at the clinic in Baltimore. He sighed heavily, took off his glasses, and told me the surgical trial, the one that could have completely halted the macular degeneration, required a massive cash deposit up front. I signed the discharge papers because my credit was utterly destroyed from medical debt. The Hopkins trial. That's what Owen called the magic surgery. He had heard me crying over the insurance denial letters on the kitchen floor that night. He had felt his way into the living room, sat beside me on the cheap linoleum, and whispered, "Mom, I don't need the magic surgery. I've been practicing walking with my eyes closed. I won't be a burden. I promise." He was 11. He genuinely thought embracing the darkness was his duty to save me from financial ruin. And all that time, the money had been sitting in an account under Nadia's name. I stared hard at my sister. The ringing in my ears stopped. Everything became hyper-focused. Where is the money? My voice was terrifyingly calm. She pushed her plate away. Her eyes darted nervously toward the emergency exit, then back to my phone, then to Owen, who was chewing his pizza, totally unaware of the nuclear bomb that had just detonated across the table. "I was investing it," she whispered, leaning in so the people in the next booth wouldn't hear. "I was trying to grow the principal so you'd have a much bigger safety net. You know you're terrible with money, Audrey. I was protecting it. You're terrible with money." The gaslighting was so reflexive, so practiced, she didn't even hesitate. But my mind was already racing backward through her lavish life over the past 3 years. The luxury ski chalet she and her husband rented in Aspen last December. The brand new electric SUV she proudly parked in my crumbling driveway every Sunday for family dinners. The extensive landscaping project she documented online, calling it her hard-earned backyard oasis. I checked the mental timeline. That landscaping was finished the exact same month I had to tell Owen we couldn't afford the Baltimore trip. The same month he tripped over the coffee table and fractured his wrist because his vision had degraded so rapidly. And the cruelty went so much deeper than the theft. Every single Thanksgiving, Nadia would pull me into a tight hug in front of our aunts and cousins. She would praise my resilience. She would tell everyone, with tears in her eyes, how beautifully I was handling life as a struggling single mother. She actively weaponized my poverty to make herself look like a supportive saint, soaking up the family's admiration while funding her luxury lifestyle with the exact cash meant to save my son's fading eyesight. Dad's voice crackled through the tiny speaker, devoid of any paternal warmth. As a licensed CPA, embezzling from a family trust isn't just a silly mistake. Nadia, it's a career-ending felony. She went completely pale. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her designer foundation looking like a cheap mask. "Duncan," she said, addressing our father by his first name. She only did that when she was backed into a corner. "Duncan, please, we can handle this privately. Don't say things like felony in front of the boy. Don't you dare talk about my son," I snapped. Owen stopped chewing. He tilted his head toward my voice. "Mom, is everything okay? Is Aunt Nadia mad?" "Everything is fine, sweetheart," I said, forcing my voice to soften. My hands were shaking so violently I had to press them flat against the table. I looked at Nadia. "Get out. Audrey, wait, let's go to my house. Let's pour a glass of wine and look at the ledgers. I can explain the market downturns. Get out of this booth before I throw this pitcher of soda at your head," I said. She looked at my face, saw that I meant it, and slid out of the booth. She grabbed her leather tote bag, her hands fumbling with the strap. She didn't look at Dad on the screen. She practically jogged toward the front doors, pushing past a family carrying a stack of pizzas. I looked back down at the phone. Dad was rubbing his eyes. He looked 10 years older than he had 5 minutes ago. "I'll wire you $20,000 tomorrow," he said, his voice heavy, "from my personal account. It's all I have liquid right now. Call Hopkins. See See if the trial is still open. Dad, I'm sorry, Audrey. I thought she was helping you. He hung up. I sat there in the noise of the pizzeria. Owen reached across the table and found my wrist. His fingers traced the rigid tendons in my arm. Are we in trouble, Mom? No, baby, I said, swallowing the massive lump in my throat. We're not in trouble. I drove us home in a daze. The streetlights bled into long, blurry streaks across the windshield. Owen fell asleep in the passenger seat, his head leaning against the cold glass. I kept replaying Nadia's words. I was trying to grow the principal. You know you're terrible with money. When we got back to the condo, I guided Owen to his bedroom. He brushed his teeth, navigating the tiny bathroom by touch, finding his toothbrush exactly where I always left it. Once he was tucked in, I went out to the kitchen and opened my laptop. I pulled up the PDF Dad had emailed me. I spent the next 2 hours cross-referencing the dates of the deposited checks with my own bank statements. It was a masochistic exercise, but I couldn't stop myself. June 14th, Nadia deposited $1,500. June 18th, I overdrew my checking account by $42 trying to buy groceries, incurring a $35 penalty fee. October 3rd, Nadia deposited $1,500. October 5th, I sat in a predatory loan office signing paperwork at 22% interest to fix the transmission on my Honda so I could keep driving Uber. By midnight, my eyes were burning. The anger had bypassed boiling and settled into a cold, hard block of ice in my chest. I didn't want a glass of wine. I didn't want an apology. I wanted my sister destroyed. My phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. It was 12:15 a.m. The caller ID read, Garrett, Nadia's husband. I let it ring 3 times before I picked it up. I didn't say hello. Audrey, Garrett said. His voice was smooth, practiced. He sounded like he was pacing. I could hear the faint echo of their vaulted living room ceiling. Listen, Nadia just told me what happened at dinner. It's a massive misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I repeated. She pooled the funds, Garrett said smoothly, slipping right into corporate crisis management mode. He was a commercial real estate broker. Everything was a negotiation to him. She commingled the trust with our high-yield portfolio to beat inflation. The market took a hit. She panicked and didn't want to tell you until she recovered the losses. She was just embarrassed, Odd. She bought an $80,000 electric car. Garrett, there was a slight pause on the line. That was a business lease. Tax write-off. Irrelevant. Look, we want to make this right. Family is family. I've talked to her, and we are willing to write you a check tomorrow morning for $15,000 to settle this. No lawyers, no dad screaming about felonies. We just reset. I gripped the edge of the laminate kitchen counter. The theft is $54,000, not including 3 years of interest. Audrey, be reasonable, Garrett sighed, the fake warmth dropping from his voice, replaced by a patronizing edge. You're living paycheck to paycheck. 15 grand is life-changing money for you. You can take Owen to Disney World. You can pay off that car. If you drag this into court, it'll take years. The legal fees will eat up the principal anyway, and Nadia will make sure of it. The threat was subtle, but it was there. Did you know? I asked. Did I know what? Did you know the landscaping for your backyard was paid for with money meant to keep my son from going blind? Don't be dramatic, Garrett snapped. Nadia manages the household accounts. I don't look at the line items. I'm offering you a lifeline here, Audrey. Take the 15 grand. Sign a non-disclosure release. We all move on. A non-disclosure release. I laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound in the quiet kitchen. You want me to sign an ENDA about my own sister robbing my blind son? I want you to think about what happens if you don't, Garrett said. His voice was very quiet now. Nadia is a partner at her firm. If you try to blow up her career over a family dispute, she will bury you in litigation. You can't afford a retainer. You can barely afford your electric bill. He wasn't wrong. He knew exactly where my pressure points were. I'll think about it, I lied, and hung up the phone. I stood in the dark kitchen. The refrigerator hummed loudly. Garrett's words echoed in my head. She will bury you in litigation. I unlocked my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I stopped on a name, Dana Mercer. We had been roommates in college. She dropped out of our liberal arts program sophomore year, switched to pre-law, and was now a junior partner at a family law firm downtown. We only texted on birthdays now, but she was the only lawyer I knew. I typed out a message. Dana, I need help. My sister embezzled $54K from my disabled son's medical trust. Her husband just threatened to bury me in court if I report it. Can I call you tomorrow? I hit send. I didn't expect a reply at 12:30 a.m., but 3 minutes later, my phone lit up. I'm awake. Call me right now. I walked out onto the tiny concrete balcony of my condo, pulling the sliding glass door shut behind me so I wouldn't wake Owen. The night air was freezing. Audrey, Dana answered on the first ring. She sounded wide awake, keyboard clacking in the background. Tell me exactly what happened. Don't leave out a single penny. I told her everything. The FaceTime call, the PDF of checks, Nadia's panic, Garrett's phone call offering 15 grand and an ENDA. I told her about the Hopkins trial, and Owen practicing being blind. By the time I finished, I was crying again, hot tears freezing on my cheeks. Dana didn't interrupt once. When I finally stopped talking, the keyboard clacking had ceased. Okay, Dana said softly. First of all, breathe. You're not going to be buried in litigation. Garrett is an idiot playing lawyer. He's rich, Dana. They have unlimited resources. They have assets, Dana corrected. But right now, Nadia has a massive, glaring vulnerability. She's a licensed CPA. She didn't just steal from you. She breached fiduciary duty. If she is reported to the state licensing board, she loses her license. Her career is over. Her partnership is gone. Garrett knows this. That's why he's offering you 15 grand to shut up. So what do? Do I call the police? Not yet, Dana said. Her tone shifted, becoming sharp and analytical. If you go to the police right now, it becomes a criminal investigation. Nadia gets arrested, yes, but the money gets tied up in restitution orders that could take a decade to enforce. She could declare bankruptcy to avoid paying it back. If your goal is to get the money for Owen's surgery, we don't drop the nuclear bomb right away. We use the nuclear bomb as leverage. Garrett offered you 15. That tells me they don't have the 54 liquid. They spent it. But they have equity. They have that electric SUV. They have retirement accounts. Dana paused. Audrey, how far are you willing to take this? Because if we do this, it's going to get incredibly ugly. Nadia will hate you for the rest of her life. She will turn your family against you. I looked through the glass door at the dark hallway leading to Owen's room. I thought about him dragging his fingers along the wall to find his way to the bathroom. I thought about the 3 years of Thanksgiving dinners. Nadia holding my hand, telling me how strong I was. I don't care, I said. I want every single cent back. I want Owen in that trial. Good, Dana said. Don't sign anything. Don't answer Garrett's calls. I'm drawing up a demand letter right now. We're going to ask for the full $54,000 plus 6% interest, payable in 10 days. If they fail to comply, we report her to the state board and hand the PDF to the district attorney. Will it work? It'll make them sweat, Dana said. But Audrey, people like Nadia don't just hand over a check and apologize. When cornered, they lash out. Be prepared for her to come after you. Personally, we hung up. I stood on the balcony for a long time, watching the sparse traffic on the road below. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. The despair of the last 3 years was gone, replaced by a cold, mechanical focus. The next morning, I woke up at 6. I made Owen his oatmeal, guiding his hand to the bowl. I didn't mention the dinner. I drove him to school, watching him navigate the front steps with his white cane, his posture hunched, trying to make himself small so the other kids wouldn't bump into him. When I got back to my car, there was a notification on my phone. An email from Dad. Wire transfer initiated. $20,000. Should clear by noon. Call the clinic. I leaned my head against the steering wheel and exhaled. It wasn't the full amount, but it was enough to reopen the conversation with Baltimore. I immediately dialed the Hopkins ophthalmology department. After 20 minutes on hold, a trial coordinator named Claire answered. Hi, I said, my voice shaking slightly. My son, Owen, was evaluated for the macular trial about 6 months ago. We couldn't secure the funding then, but we have $20,000 available today, and more coming. Is there still a spot? I heard the clicking of a mouse on Claire's end. Let me pull up his file, Claire said. A long minute passed. Owen. Yes, here he is. Dr. Halverson's patient. Yes, can we get him back on the schedule? Claire hesitated. The silence stretched out too long. My stomach dropped. Ma'am, Claire said gently. The surgical trial closed enrollment last month. The cohort is full. No, I said, gripping the phone. No, please, you don't understand. We have the money now. He's an ideal candidate. Dr. Halvorson said he was a perfect match. He was a perfect match 6 months ago, Claire said, her voice full of professional sympathy that did absolutely nothing to dull the pain. But macular degeneration is progressive. I'm looking at his chart. Even if we had a spot, the surgery is only effective before the retinal scarring reaches a certain threshold. It's preventative, not restorative. At this stage, the damage is likely permanent. I am so sorry. The world tilted on its axis. The damage is likely permanent. I couldn't breathe. The air in the car felt thick, suffocating. 6 months ago. We had the money 6 months ago. We had it 3 years ago. Nadia had it. Nadia bought a luxury car while my son's retinas scarred over permanently. I hung up the phone. I didn't cry. The sadness was gone entirely. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the school parking lot. I didn't drive toward my condo. I drove across town, toward the wealthy suburbs, toward the gated community with the pristine landscaping and the vaulted ceilings. I pulled up to Nadia's house. Her brand new electric SUV was sitting in the driveway, gleaming in the morning sun. I put my car in park, got out, and walked up to the heavy oak front door. I didn't bother knocking. I pressed my thumb against the doorbell and held it there, letting the chime echo endlessly through the massive house. A minute later, the door jerked open. Nadia stood there in a plush silk robe, holding a mug of coffee. Her eyes were puffy, and she looked exhausted. Audrey, she said, blinking in surprise. What are you doing here? Did Garrett talk to you? The trial is closed, I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded hollow. Nadia frowned, taking a step back. What? The surgical trial in Baltimore. It's closed. And even if it wasn't, Owen's vision has degraded too far. The damage is permanent. He is going to be blind forever. Nadia's face crumbled. She covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God. Audrey, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You didn't know, I repeated. I swear to you, I didn't think it was that urgent. I thought it was just a preventative thing. I thought we had time. She reached out to touch my arm. I slapped her hand away so hard the coffee mug flew from her grip, shattering against the slate porch tiles. Hot coffee splashed across her bare shins. She shrieked, jumping back. Are you crazy? You bought a car, I said, stepping into the doorway, forcing her back into the foyer. You bought a car, and you landscaped your backyard, and you went to Aspen. And my son is going to live in darkness for the rest of his life. Audrey, stop, Nadia stammered, backing up against the hallway console table. You're scaring me. Garrett is upstairs. I don't care if Garrett is upstairs. I don't care if the police are upstairs. I stepped closer to her. I could smell her expensive vanilla perfume. It made me nauseous. Dana Mercer is drafting a demand letter. You are going to pay back the $54,000. You are going to pay the interest. And then I am going to the state board anyway. And I am going to make sure you never touch a ledger again. Nadia's eyes widened in sheer panic. The sorrow vanished, instantly replaced by self-preservation. You can't do that. Audrey, if I lose my license, we lose this house. The mortgage is completely dependent on my partnership draw. Good, I said. Then you'll know exactly how it feels. I turned around and walked back out the door, leaving her standing in the spilled coffee and broken ceramic. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove away. My hands were shaking, but my mind was perfectly clear. This wasn't just about the money anymore. The money couldn't fix Owen's eyes. It was about dismantling the life she had built on top of my son's suffering. When I got home, I opened my laptop and started digging. If Nadia was arrogant enough to deposit stolen trust checks directly into a shell LLC, what else was she hiding? I didn't need to be an investigator. I just needed to know where to look. I pulled up the public property tax records for her house. Then I checked the state registry for the LLC Dad had mentioned, Voss Holdings LLC. The registered agent was Nadia. I spent hours cross-referencing public data, looking for anything out of place. By 3 in the afternoon, my eyes were straining, but I found it. Voss Holdings LLC didn't just hold the trust money. It held the deed to a commercial property on the south side of town, a property that, according to the city zoning board, had been recently leased to a chain of private daycares. I leaned back in my chair. Garrett was a commercial real estate broker. He handled leases. If he brokered a deal for a property owned by an LLC his wife controlled, without disclosing the conflict of interest to his brokerage, that wasn't just unethical. That was fraud. Garrett didn't just know about the stolen money. He and Nadia were using the LLC to wash their own dirty real estate deals. My phone buzzed. A text from Dana. Demand letter sent via certified mail and email. Garrett's lawyer just called me. They want an emergency mediation session tomorrow. They sound panicked. I stared at the screen, looking at the public records for Voss Holdings. Tell them I'll be there, I typed back, and tell them to bring their corporate disclosures. I set the phone face down on the laminate counter and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. The silence in the condo felt entirely different now. For 3 years, it had been the silence of drowning, of tallying up late fees in my head while staring at the ceiling. Now, it was the silence of a loaded gun. I walked down the narrow hallway to Owen's room. The door was cracked open. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, listening to an audiobook playing playing from his tablet. He had his head tilted slightly toward the speaker, his hands resting loosely in his lap. The bedside lamp was off. He didn't need it anymore. Hey, bud, I said softly, stepping into the room. He paused the story. Hey, Mom, is everything okay with Aunt Nadia? You guys were really mad at the restaurant. We just had a disagreement about some paperwork, I said. I sat down next to him, feeling the mattress dip. Nothing you need to worry about. He reached out, his hand finding my arm, then sliding down to hold my hand. His fingers traced my knuckles. He was getting so good at mapping the world through touch, adapting with a quiet, heartbreaking resilience that I had praised just a week ago. Now, it just made me want to scream. I don't mind the dark, Mom, he said quietly. I know you're stressed about money, but I don't need the magic surgery. I'm okay. I pulled him into a hug, pressing my face into his shoulder so he wouldn't hear my breathing hitch. I know you are, Owen. You're the bravest kid I know. But you let me handle the grown-up stuff, okay? You just focus on school. I stayed with him until he fell asleep, then I went back to the kitchen table. I didn't sleep. I drank bitter instant coffee and organized the printouts of the public records into a neat manila folder. I traced the lines connecting the stolen trust checks to Voss Holdings, and from Voss Holdings to the commercial property leases. It was so blatantly arrogant. Nadia had assumed I would never look. She assumed the broke, overwhelmed single mother who couldn't balance her own checking account would never understand corporate shell structures. The next morning, I dropped Owen at school and drove straight downtown to Dana's office. Her firm occupied the 14th floor of a glass and steel building that overlooked the river. I felt deeply out of place in my 5-year-old wool coat and scuffed boots, walking past the abstract art and the frosted glass partitions. Dana met me in the lobby. She looked sharp, wearing a tailored navy suit, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. You look like you're going to a funeral, she said, pulling me into a quick hug. I feel like I'm hosting one, I replied. She led me to a small conference room at the end of the hall. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind us. Garrett's lawyer is already here. His name is Ellis Tate. He's a partner at a mid-sized defense firm. Slick, expensive, entirely transactional. He's going to try to patronize you. Let him. Do not interrupt him. Let them lay out their garbage offer first, and then I'll hand you the floor. Are they here? I asked. Nadia and Garrett are in the waiting room on the other side. They look terrified. Well, Nadia looks terrified. Garrett looks pissed. Dana sat down and opened her legal pad. You ready? Bring them in. A minute later, the door opened. Ellis Tate walked in first, carrying a leather briefcase. He had silver hair and a practiced, easy smile that didn't reach his eyes. Garrett followed, wearing a custom gray suit, looking tense but trying to project authority. Nadia came in last. She wore a simple beige sweater, no jewelry, and minimal makeup. It was a calculated look. She was playing the part of the contrite, exhausted sister. She didn't look at me. She sat as far down the long glass table as she could. Good morning, Audrey, Ellis said, taking a seat and resting his hands on the table. I want to thank you for agreeing to meet so quickly. I know tensions are high, but Garrett and Nadia are very committed to finding an amicable family resolution here. Nobody wants to see this escalate to litigation. It's emotionally draining and financially ruinous for everyone involved. Cut the prelude, Ellis, Dana said flatly. What's the number? Ellis cleared his throat, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. My clients acknowledged that there was a misallocation of trust funds. Nadia took it upon herself to invest the principal in a high-yield vehicle. It was an error in judgment, absolutely, but the intent was pure. She wanted to grow the trust for Owen's future. Unfortunately, the real estate market fluctuated, and the funds were temporarily illiquid. Garrett leaned forward, looking directly at me. Audrey, we messed up. Nadia panicked when the market dipped. She should have told you, but we want to make it right now. Today, we are prepared. Ellis interrupted smoothly, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table, to offer a lump sum of $35,000. Settle the matter entirely. You sign a standard non-disclosure agreement, a waiver of all civil claims, and we part ways. You get a massive influx of cash today, Owen gets his treatment, and the family can begin to heal. I stared at the piece of paper. $35,000. They were still shorting my son almost $20,000, not including interest, while sitting in tailored suits and driving $80,000 cars. Owen isn't getting his treatment, I said. My voice was very quiet. Nadia finally looked up. Her eyes were red. What do you mean? Garrett asked, his brow furrowing. I thought the Baltimore trial was the whole point of this. The trial closed enrollment, I said, looking right at my sister. And even if it hadn't, his vision has degraded too far. The damage is permanent. He is going blind, and there is nothing I can do to stop it. Because when we had the window to save him, Nadia was using his medical money to lease a daycare center on the south side of town. The room went entirely dead. Ellis stopped breathing. Garrett's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide. Nadia shrank back into her chair as if she had been physically struck. I don't know what you're talking about, Garrett said, but his voice lacked conviction. It sounded hollow. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I opened the manila folder and slid a stack of stapled papers across the glass. They stopped right in front of Ellis. Voss Holdings LLC, I said, reading from my own notes. Registered to Nadia Voss. The LLC received 36 deposits of $1,500, the exact amount of my father's checks. 3 months ago, Voss Holdings purchased a commercial lease on 4th Street. That lease was then sublet to a private daycare chain. I looked at Garrett. He was staring at the papers, his jaw tight. You brokered that sublet, Garrett, I continued. I pulled the municipal zoning filings. Your name is on the brokerage agreement. You took a commission on a property leased by your wife's shell company, using my disabled son's stolen money as the capital. Ellis quickly picked up the papers. His eyes scanned the documents, his face draining of color. He looked at Garrett. Garrett, did you disclose your marital connection to Voss Holdings to your brokerage firm? Garrett didn't answer. He was glaring at Nadia. The veins in his neck were standing out. You told me the capital was from your partnership draw. He hissed at her. You told me the trust money was in a separate index fund. It was just a temporary bridge loan. Nadia cried out, her voice cracking. We were short on the liquid cash for the deposit. I was going to put it back as soon as the daycare paid their first quarter rent. Garrett, you knew we needed the cash. I didn't know it was the kids' medical money. Garrett shouted, completely abandoning the calm, corporate persona. He slammed his hand on the table. Are you insane? You dragged my license into this? Your license? I asked, laughing. It was a cold, bitter sound. You threatened to bury me in court last night, Garrett. You told me I was too poor to fight you. You knew she stole the money. You just didn't realize how stupid she was about paper trails. Okay, let's take a breath, Ellis said, holding up a hand. He looked deeply uncomfortable. He was a defense lawyer, but he wasn't a miracle worker. He knew dead to rights when he saw it. There's no taking a breath, Dana said, leaning forward. Here is the reality of the situation. You owe my client $54,000 in principal. We are calculating 6% interest over 3 years, which brings the total to roughly $64,000, plus my legal fees, which currently stand at $5,000. $69,000, Ellis said, rubbing his forehead. By 5 p.m. on Friday, Dana confirmed. Cashier's check. If that check is not in my hand, I file the lawsuit. Simultaneously, I will send this exact folder to the State Board of Accountancy regarding Nadia, and the State Real Estate Commission regarding Garrett. You will both lose your licenses. You will lose your careers. You will lose that massive house. Garrett looked at me. The arrogance was entirely gone, replaced by raw, unadulterated panic. Audrey, please, we don't have $69,000 in liquid cash right now. The money is tied up in the property. Then sell the electric car, I said. Or sell your ski passes. Or take out a predatory loan at 22% interest. That's what I did to fix my transmission so I could drive drunks home at 3 in the morning. Figure it out. I stood up. I didn't want to be in the room with them anymore. The air felt toxic. Audrey, wait, Nadia sobbed. Real tears this time. Tears of self-pity. Please, I'm your sister. Mom would be horrified by this. I stopped at the door and looked back at her. Mom would be horrified that her grandson is going to navigate the world with a cane because you wanted a backyard oasis. Don't ever invoke her name to me again. I walked out of the conference room and didn't look back. Dana stayed behind to finalize the exact payment instructions with Ellis. I took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out into the cold midday sun. I felt a fleeting rush of adrenaline, a sharp spike of vindication, but it vanished almost immediately. I unlocked my car and sat in the driver's seat. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. I had won the battle. I had destroyed them. But as I sat there in the quiet car, the reality crushed me all over again. $69,000 in my bank account wouldn't bring back the light to Owen's eyes. I had secured a future safety net, but I had failed to save his sight. I drove home in a daze. I had to pick Owen up from school in 2 hours. I needed to figure out how to navigate the rest of our lives. We needed to look into mobility training, Braille resources, a complete overhaul of how we lived. When I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed a picture of my Aunt Vivian. She was my mother's youngest sister, the unofficial matriarch of the extended family since my mother died. She hosted the 4th of July barbecues and kept the family group chat active. I hesitated, then swiped to answer. Hi, Aunt Viv. Audrey, Vivian said. Her tone was entirely wrong. It wasn't her usual warm, bubbling greeting. It was stiff, frigid. I just got off the phone with Nadia. My stomach dropped. Vivian, whatever she told you, she told me you threatened to have her arrested. Vivian interrupted, her voice rising in indignation. She is absolutely hysterical, Audrey. She had to pull over on the highway because she was hyperventilating. Did she tell you why? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. Did she mention the $54,000 she stole from Owen? She told me about the investment mistake, Vivian said quickly, brushing past the word stole like it was an inconvenience. She was trying to help you. She knows you struggle with money management, Audrey. We all do. We all see you working yourself to the bone. She made a bad call with the market, but to demand $70,000 from her, to threaten her and Garrett's careers, over an accounting error? I closed my eyes. Nadia had gotten out in front of the narrative. She had taken the truth, twisted it just enough to fit her victim complex, and fed it to the family. It wasn't an accounting error, I said, my voice trembling with a new, exhausting kind of rage. She forged fiduciary documents and funneled my father's checks into her own shell company to buy real estate. Audrey, listen to yourself, Vivian sighed, employing that deeply patronizing, sympathetic tone that Nadia had perfected over the years. You sound paranoid. Duncan has been on that oil rig too long. His mind is slipping, and you're letting the stress of Owen's condition make you vindictive. Nadia said you demanded cash because you're drowning in credit card debt. She said you wouldn't even listen to her explain the trust structure. She bought a luxury car while I pawned Grandma's piano. I snapped, the words tumbling out desperately. Aunt Viv, Owen missed the trial window. He's going permanently blind. There was a pause on the line. For a second, I thought the reality had pierced through Nadia's lies. But then Vivian spoke, and her words were like ice water down my spine. Nadia mentioned that, Vivian said softly. She said you were lashing out because you felt guilty, because you waited too long to ask the family for help with the medical bills. And now you're trying to blame her for the tragedy to make yourself feel better. I stopped breathing. The sheer, sociopathic brilliance of it was staggering. Nadia hadn't just minimized the theft, she had completely inverted the guilt. She had weaponized my worst nightmare, my own internalized fear that I had failed my son by being poor, and broadcast it to the entire family as the psychological motive for my extortion. I am not speaking to you about this anymore, I whispered. Audrey, don't shut us out. We want to help. Uncle Robert and I are willing to give you $5,000 to help pay down your debts, but you have to call off this lawyer. You cannot destroy your sister's life over your own guilt. I hung up the phone. I sat in the car, staring at the cracked dashboard. My phone buzzed again. A text from my cousin Liam, then another from my Aunt Sarah. The family group chat was lighting up. I didn't have to read the messages to know what they said. Nadia was a partner at a firm. She threw the lavish parties. She sent the expensive Christmas gifts. I was the struggling, depressed single mother who drove an Uber. They had chosen their reality because it was easier to digest. I blocked Vivian's number, then Liam's, then Sarah's. I went through my contacts and systematically blocked every extended family member who shared blood with Nadia. The money was coming on Friday. That was all that mattered now. I went inside, washed my face, and prepared to go pick up my son. When I got to the middle school, the final bell had already rung. The kids were pouring out of the double doors, a chaotic sea of backpacks and shouting. I stood by the front steps, scanning the crowd for Owen. Usually, he waited right by the brick pillar, his cane tucked against his side, but he wasn't there. I walked up the steps, pushing past a group of 8th graders. Excuse me, have you seen Owen? They ignored me. I went into the main office. The secretary, a kind woman named Mrs. Gable who always slipped Owen extra graham crackers, was typing at her desk. Mrs. Gable, I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Is Owen still in the building? He wasn't at his spot. She looked up, frowning. Owen? No, honey. His aunt picked him up about 20 minutes ago. She said there was a family emergency. I stared at Mrs. Gable. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, a sharp electric hum that suddenly sounded deafening. She picked him up? I repeated. My voice was completely flat. My brain was trying to process the words, but they weren't slotting into place. Yes, right before the bell, Mrs. Gable said, her brow furrowing with sudden concern. She signed him out at the front desk. She said your father had a medical incident on the rig, and you were dealing with the hospital coordination. Audrey, is your dad okay? Not Nadia hadn't just taken my son. She had used the one excuse she knew would stop a school secretary from asking follow-up questions. My dad is fine, I said. I turned around and walked out of the office. I didn't run. I knew if I ran, I would look like a frantic, unstable woman, and right now, I needed to be entirely methodical. I pushed through the double doors, walked down the concrete steps, and got into my car. I locked the doors. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped my keys on the floorboard. I left them there and grabbed my phone. I dialed Nadia's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Audrey, Nadia answered. Her voice was incredibly calm. It was the voice of a hostage negotiator speaking to a jumper on a ledge. Where is he? He's perfectly safe. We're at Aunt Viv's house, Nadia said. The background noise was quiet. No television, no background chatter, just the faint clink of silverware on porcelain. We're having tea in the sunroom. He just ate a slice of lemon loaf. You kidnapped my son from his middle school, I said, every word like a stone dropping from my mouth. Don't use words like that, Nadia scolded gently as if correcting a toddler. I am his aunt. I am listed as an emergency contact on his school file. I checked him out because we need to have a family conversation. And you have been entirely unresponsive and aggressive. You blocked Vivian. You blocked Sarah. You're spiraling, Audrey. I am coming to get him. If he is not waiting on the curb when I pull up, I am calling the police. The police? Nadia let out a sad, patronizing sigh. Audrey, Garrett is here. Uncle Robert is here. Ellis, our lawyer, is on speakerphone. If you call the police, you are going to look incredibly foolish and frankly dangerously unstable. We just want to talk. We want to give you the check. Come to Viv's. Let's act like adults. She hung up. I sat in the car for 10 seconds, staring at the brick wall of the middle school. They had staged an intervention. They had taken Owen to force me into a room with the entire family, using him as collateral to make me sign the settlement. I reached down, grabbed my keys, jammed them into the ignition, and threw the car into drive. Aunt Vivian lived in a sprawling, mid-century modern ranch in the wealthy historic district, about 20 minutes away. I made it in 12. When I turned onto her tree-lined street, I saw the cars. Nadia's electric SUV, Garrett's Audi, Uncle Robert's polished Lexus. They were all parked in the wide circular driveway, a barricade of German engineering and family wealth. I parked my Honda on the street, behind a massive oak tree. I walked up the manicured stone path. I didn't knock. I opened the heavy front door and stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of expensive cinnamon potpourri and furniture polish. Audrey, is that you? Vivian called out from the back of the house. I walked down the wide hallway and stepped into the sunken living room. They were all sitting there. Vivian and Robert on the matching cream-colored love seats. Garrett standing by the fireplace, a glass of sparkling water in his hand. Nadia sitting in a high-backed armchair, looking mournful. And on the far end of the long leather sofa sat Owen. He looked incredibly small. His backpack was resting between his feet, and his hands were gripping his white cane so tightly his knuckles were pale. His head was tilted slightly down, listening to the suffocating silence in the room. Mom, he said, his head snapping up at the sound of my boots on the hardwood floor. I'm here, baby, I said. I didn't look at any of them. I walked straight across the room, past Garrett, past Vivian, and put my hand on Owen's shoulder. I could feel the tension vibrating through his body. He was terrified. Stand up, we're leaving. Audrey, please, Vivian said, standing up and smoothing down her cardigan. Sit down. Let me pour you some tea. We are all family here. We love you. We love Owen. But you are clearly going through a mental health crisis, and we cannot let you destroy your sister's life because of a delusion. I stopped. I kept my hand on Owen's shoulder and turned to look at my aunt. A delusion. The $54,000, Audrey, Uncle Robert said heavily. He was a retired orthodontist, a man who spoke in slow, measured tones because he was used to people listening to him. Nadia showed us the brokerage statements. She showed us the losses. She made a bad investment. She didn't steal anything. But you walking into Ellis Tate's office and threatening to ruin Garrett's real estate career over a completely unrelated commercial lease? That's extortion. It's paranoid. I looked at Nadia. She met my gaze, her eyes wide and innocent, but there was a flicker of absolute triumph deep in her pupils. She had completely insulated herself. She had shown them doctored or entirely unrelated financial statements. She had convinced them that my discovery of Voss Holdings was just the frantic, disjointed conspiracy theory of a broke, desperate woman. Look at this table, Audrey, Garrett said, gesturing to the glass coffee table. Sitting next to a plate of sliced lemon loaf was a thick cashier's check. Beside it was a printed legal document with a blue sticky note pointing to a signature line. $40,000, Garrett said. We bumped it up. That is more than fair to cover the investment losses. You sign the ENDA, you take the check, and you drop this ridiculous vendetta. You can pay off your condo. You can buy Owen whatever braille equipment he needs. And if I don't? I asked. Garrett took a sip of his sparkling water. He looked at Vivian. Vivian nodded sadly. If you don't, Vivian said gently, we are going to have to make a very difficult phone call. Audrey, your condo is falling apart. You leave Owen alone until 3 in the morning while you drive strangers around in your car. You have virtually no savings. And now you are exhibiting signs of severe paranoia and aggression. You assaulted Nadia on her front porch this morning. My breath caught in my throat. The coffee mug. She had spun me, knocking the mug out of her hand into an assault. If you don't accept this olive branch, Robert added, we will petition the state for emergency custody of Owen. We will call Child Protective Services. We cannot in good conscience allow a disabled child to live in an unstable, potentially dangerous environment when we have the means to provide for him here. The room went entirely silent. They weren't just threatening my money anymore. They weren't just threatening a lawsuit. They were threatening to take my son. They were going to use their pristine houses, their stock portfolios, and their country club respectability to convince a family court judge that I was an unfit mother. And the terrifying truth was, family courts looked at bank accounts. They looked at stability. They looked at the $42 overdraft fees on my bank statements. And they looked at Nadia's 6-figure income. I felt a cold, paralyzing dread wash over me. It started in my chest and spread down to my fingertips. Owen reached up and grabbed my hand. His fingers were trembling. He didn't know what an INDA was, but he knew what custody meant. You're not taking me anywhere, Owen said. His voice cracked high and thin, but he forced it to stay steady. He turned his face toward where Vivian was standing. My mom isn't crazy. Aunt Nadia is a liar. She took me from school and lied to Mrs. Gable about Grandpa. Owen, sweetie, you don't understand adult matters, Nadia cooed, leaning forward. Your mother is sick. She needs help. Don't talk to him, I snapped, my voice finally breaking through the ice in my throat. I looked at Garrett. You really think a family court judge won't look at Voss Holdings? You think Dana Mercer enforcer won't subpoena every single bank record, every text message, every email you and Nadia sent for the last 3 years? You think you can hide $54,000 of stolen medical funds during a custody battle? We are willing to take that risk to protect our nephew, Garrett said smoothly, though a muscle in his jaw twitched. They were bluffing. They had to be bluffing. But could I risk it? Could I risk a judge placing Owen in foster care? Or worse, with them, while the litigation dragged on for years? Take the check, Audrey, Vivian pleaded. Sign the paper. Let's go back to being a family. I looked down at the cashier's check. $40,000. It was sitting right there. It would wipe out my credit card debt. It would pay off the second mortgage. It would buy Owen the best screen reading software on the market, a proper braille display, a tutor. It was the price of my silence. It was the price of letting them win. I picked up the pen sitting next to the document. Nadia exhaled a sharp, quiet breath of relief. Garrett set his glass down on the mantel. Vivian smiled, her eyes crinkling with genuine, sickening warmth. I clicked the pen. I leaned over the coffee table. I hovered the tip of the pen over the signature line. Then I looked at the check. Paid to the order of Audrey Brennan. I put the pen down. I picked up the check, folded it in half, and slid it into the front pocket of my jeans. What are you doing? Garrett demanded, stepping away from the fireplace. I'm keeping the check, I said, picking up the unsigned enda and tearing it straight down the middle. I dropped the pieces onto the plate of lemon loaf. Consider it a down payment on the $69,000 you owe me. You can't do that. Nadia shrieked, jumping up from her armchair. The serene, mournful sister act vanished in an instant. Garrett, stop her. That's our money. It's my money, I said. And if you try to stop me from walking out that front door, I will call 911 and report a kidnapping and unlawful restraint. And I will hand the police the folder with the Voss Holdings LLC paperwork right there in your driveway. Audrey, this is a mistake, Uncle Robert warned, his voice turning hard. You are crossing a line you cannot uncross. You crossed it when you put my son in your car, Nadia, I said. I gripped Owen's hand. Come on, bud. We're going home. Owen stood up, swinging his backpack over his shoulder. He tapped his cane once against the edge of the sofa to orient himself, and then we walked. We walked right past Vivian, who was staring at me with open, horrified disgust. We walked down the hallway, through the cinnamon-scented foyer, and out the heavy front door. Nobody followed us. We got to the car. I opened the passenger door, helped Owen inside, and closed it. I walked around to the driver's side, got in, and locked the doors. I didn't start the engine immediately. I just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my joints ached. I had the $40,000. I had physical evidence of their desperation in my pocket, but I had also just declared absolute war on my entire family. Mom? Owen asked quietly into the silence of the car. Yeah, baby, did Aunt Nadia really steal the money for my eyes? I closed my eyes. The tears I had been fighting back all day finally spilled over, hot and bitter, running down my cheeks. Yes, she did. Okay, Owen said. He reached out and touched the dashboard, feeling the familiar texture of our old beat-up Honda. I don't want to see them anymore. Not for Thanksgiving. Not for anything. You never have to see them again. I promise. I started the car and pulled away from the curb, leaving the massive house and the driveway full of luxury cars behind. We were halfway home when my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth speakers. It was Dana. Hey, I said, trying to clear the thickness from my throat. I got $40,000 out of them. A cashier's check. But I didn't sign the enda. Audrey, listen to me, Dana said. Her voice wasn't sharp with legal strategy anymore. It was tight. Urgent. Where are you right now? I'm driving home. I just picked up Owen from Aunt Vivian's. Do not go to your condo, Dana said. I tapped the brakes, my heart instantly spiking into my throat. What? Why? Garrett's lawyer didn't wait for your answer on the settlement, Dana said, the keyboard clacking aggressively in the background. Ellis Tate just filed an ex parte emergency motion in family court. They aren't going to see peace. They bypassed them entirely. Nadia is petitioning for temporary emergency guardianship of Owen, citing severe maternal mental instability and a hostile living environment. An ex parte motion, I repeated, my voice flat. How serious is this? Serious enough that I need you to trust me completely right now, Dana said. Drive to my office. Not your condo, not anywhere else, my office. Do you understand? Yes, good. And Audrey, a beat of silence. You still have that folder with the Voss Holdings paperwork? Right here. Bring every single page. The ex parte motion was denied at 4:47 p.m. the following afternoon. Dana had been awake for 36 hours. She filed a counter motion that evening, attaching the Voss Holdings documents, the scanned transfer checks, the municipal zoning filings, and a signed affidavit from my father, transmitted from his satellite connection somewhere in the North Atlantic. She also submitted the school security footage of Nadia removing Owen without my consent. Footage misses. Gable had quietly flagged for the principal that same afternoon, because she had felt something was wrong the moment I walked into her office. The judge, a small, methodical woman named the Honorable Patricia Wren, read everything overnight. At the hearing, she looked at Ellis Tate over her reading glasses and asked, with surgical precision, whether his client was prepared to explain why a Shell LLC bearing her name had received 36 deposits of exactly $1,500 from a timber lease account registered to a third party, and whether his client understood the legal definition of a fraudulent transfer. Ellis asked for a recess. Judge Wren denied it. The full $69,412 arrived by wire transfer 18 days later. Dana called me while I was sitting in the school pickup line to tell me it had cleared. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the surge of triumph I had been waiting for. I just sat there listening to the sound of the school bell ringing, watching the doors open and the kids spill out into the gray afternoon. Owen appeared at the top of the steps, his cane sweeping in short arcs across the concrete. He had started orientation and mobility training 2 weeks earlier. His instructor, a former Marine named Clarence, had told me after the first session that Owen had the spatial memory of a kid twice his age. I watched him navigate the steps without hesitating. He found the path, turned right toward the pickup lane, and located my Honda by touching the side mirror, a habit he had developed entirely on his own. He got in, dropped his backpack between his feet, and slammed the door. Clarence said I'm ready to try the city bus route, he announced. I know. He texted me. Can we try it Saturday? Yes, he settled back into the seat. A minute passed as I pulled into traffic. Did the money come? He asked. I glanced at him. His face was tilted toward the window, tracking the sounds of passing cars. 14 years old and already so practiced at reading the world through everything except his eyes. It came, I said. He nodded once. He didn't ask what we were going to do with it. He already knew the answer. Tuition for the new school with the dedicated vision support program. Braille equipment. The refreshable display Dana had helped me find through a a charity grant. Maybe, eventually, a ground floor apartment closer to his school, so the walk was manageable. Not a magic surgery, just a life rebuilt carefully around what remained. Good, Owen said. He pulled out his earbuds, plugged them into his phone, and started his audiobook. I drove us home through the slow evening traffic, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't calculate the gas money against what was left in my account. The silence in the car was just silence, nothing more. Nadia surrendered her CPA license voluntarily, 2 weeks before the state board formally revoked it. Garrett's brokerage opened an internal investigation into the Voss Holdings lease. I didn't follow what happened next. Dana kept me updated only when it was legally necessary. I never spoke to my aunt, my cousin, or anyone from that side of the family again. They made their choice in that sunroom, over lemon loaf and sparkling water. My father called from the rig on Owen's 15th birthday. He sang happy birthday badly, over a crackling satellite line, and Owen laughed so hard he knocked his oatmeal off the counter. It was the best sound I had heard in years.